Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another movie discussion. This being where I just talk about movies that I've watched. This is going to be like a general spoiler discussion. Obviously, for like a slightly older movie, as you can tell from the title, I just rewatched It Chapter One, or just It, the 2017 movie. So I'll probably include time codes so you can kind of jump around to the different topics and see if anything kind of jumps at you that you want to hear. Maybe my thoughts more on this and that, so on and so forth, right? So, but general thoughts in general, like I said, this general thoughts in general. Sorry, that's redundant. Like I said, this isn't my first time watching the movie. This is my second time watching it. The first time I watched it was the year it came out in 2017. So, but I've also seen, I think it specifically came out in 1990, the TV movies, I believe. The one where like Tim Curry played Pennywise. But that was many, 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 many years ago. I haven't seen it since I was a kid. But either way, so, but I really enjoyed it the first time through. And then like second time through, I still enjoyed it. Still just as like creepy and just kind of like, I don't think I got jump scared. There were some moments that still kind of freaked me out. There's some moments I do remember that I was tensing myself for. The Georgie of it all, get to that in a second. But in general, it's still just as creepy and as weird. And once again, you gotta all praise to Bill Skarsgård for just being so scary and creepy. And obviously, like, I think it's more of a thing in the second one. But like, I think even in this one, like the stuff like Pennywise does with his eyes, like that's not digital. That's just Bill Skarsgård, which is just kind of wilder. But either way, does such a fantastic job. Just such an unnerving story, scary, and especially because you're like, these are just kids dealing with it. It's just kind of like, ugh. But that's kind of like the point. It's like you're going after those who you deem weaker and vulnerable and easy to get versus an adult would probably put up too much of a fight. But I think it's also, and I think this kind of, I'll probably discuss more about the lore of it all, where it's just like, it's about going after the innocence. Like, when people get older, they lose their innocence. That's why, like, the kids can still see stuff, even though, like, the adults are completely blind to it. So, but, like, it just in general, I thought it was, like, well acted all across the board from the kids who are now obviously way older now too, but everyone from top to bottom, and just like some of the cinematography and directional choices, just really does a really good job building and keeping that scary atmosphere. Because I'm not much of a horror person. Like, this is probably like the first horror movie in general I've watched in like probably almost decades at this point in time. I don't watch horror movies that much at all, so But either way, so yeah, I just kind of went rambling on throughout that entire thing. My general thoughts, like I said, was just I very much enjoyed it the second time through. So, but yeah, just let's kind of get into some just spoiler discussions ahead going forward. Like I said, this is just, it's a couple years old, so I think it should be fine. But I will specifically label this as the spoiler section. So, like, going forward, there will be spoilers, so you have been warned. But as I was bringing up earlier, the Georgie of it all, I remembered how brutal it was in this version. I don't remember it as much from the 1990s version, but obviously from this one, I'm like, I remember Georgie getting his arm bit off, so I was like, I was bracing myself for it the entire scene. I was like, oh boy, here we go, because I remember seeing it the first time. I'm like, oh, that's gnarly, because his arm gets bit off, he's crawling away, crying for help. And that lady had seen him previously, and then she happens to turn around and like, she was inside and then she came back outside and then she saw blood in the streets. So I'd assume that was enough for her to kind of report something, but still, like, I knew going back, I was like, oh man, it's gonna be rough to see that Georgie situation again. And it's like, and especially because like Pennywise playing into like, a kid, he's gonna be like, oh, I know I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, but Pennywise draws you in, and especially those creepy moments where he just stops because he's almost like drooling. His appetite is so like bubbling to the surface. He's almost like, oh, come on, George. But he gets so quiet because like the monster in him's taking over. He's almost dropping the pretense of the clown, but he's like, oh, gotta snap back into. I haven't gotten him yet. Come on, don't you want your boat, Georgie? Type of situation. So I'll go ahead and talk about this here because I think I kind of alluded to it earlier, like a lot of the lore of this. Because I know the book. I've never read any Stephen King book, so I definitely haven't read it. But I've heard people talk about like how crazy long it is. Makes a lot of sense considering, like, I mean, like there are like two parts to the story all in one book, but I'm sure it also dives into some of like the history of Derry and stuff like that. So because that's probably where I'd probably get some of the answers I have that you can't really fit into like a 2+ hour movie. Just the stuff you can't include and you gotta cut. But for example, like why Pennywise chooses to look like a clown. And I'm sure it's like, I mean, for one, maybe it's because there are people like Richie who are afraid of clowns. But I think it's also probably because like if you were a clown, it made it a lot easier to draw children in because children were more like willing to like be captivated by a clown, and you attract that innocence, which is what Pennywise feeds off of, or at least that's what I believe. And I think it's just like as a clown, a lot of people won't notice you as much. They used to be in a position where like, yeah, they're just out and about, so no one would really notice that. So maybe that's the reason why Pennywise gravitated towards that disguise. Because I think he's always looked like Pennywise the clown, but I don't know if he's ever had other disguise. I mean, there's the transformations where he turns into stuff just to freak you out, but like a more consistent, that seems to be his quote unquote base level form, at least the one he presents to people the most. Like, how long it's had that form, why it operates the way that it does, why it needs you to be afraid before it can really eat you. Like, I mean, because I guess even in Georgie's case, like Georgie was still like afraid and fearful because it's like, you're a stranger and I'm nervous. Because he also was afraid to lose the boat because he thought his brother would be pissed at him. And so it's like, yeah, it leaves you vulnerable. But it's like, I'm wondering if it's like he legitimately can't eat you until you're afraid, or it's like whatever he gets from you when he eats you, unless you're afraid, he can't get anything. So it's almost like eating empty calories type, which is a very effed up metaphor. But I think that might be kind of what it is. Like if I don't make you afraid, it isn't just about taste. I'm sure the more afraid you are, the taste you are, but it might also just be the thing of like the more. Like, if I don't make you afraid, if I don't make you drown in fear, like, I can't get anything out of eating you, and it would be pointless to eat you. So, I won't get anything out of it. So, and I mean, to the point that he did what he did, where he didn't bother eating Beverly because she wasn't afraid anymore. And it's just like, I don't even know if that's something that's ever, like I said, like maybe it's something kind of explored and dived into more in the books. Maybe that's still left open-ended to some extent. Hell, we might even get answers to it in the second movie. I've never seen the second movie, by the way. Once again, the 1990s one, yeah, but once again, it's so long ago I forgot. But the Andy Muschietti directed ones, like I never saw it. Wasn't it 2019 when Chapter 2 came out? Never saw it. So either way, like I said, other stuff we'll probably explore this because there is a prequel series that's coming out. That's why I'm, rewatching the movies now. Well, rewatching this and watching Chapter 2 for the first time, be in preparation for it. So some of the questions I have might be answered in it, but even then, we're only going back like 27 years because like Pennywise has been around for a much, much longer time in Derry, but maybe that will explore some of the even further back history that maybe, especially as a TV show, you might have time to explore some of that more than you would like a 2+ hour movie and stuff like that. So, but why specifically Derry? Because the conversation Ben came up with about like this town being cursed, like why was it cursed in the first place? Because I feel like I remember what Pennywise is as an entity. Like I think I remember what it is. Maybe that'll be something I discuss more in Chapter 2, because that's kind of Chapter 2 stuff. I don't think that's revealed in Chapter. It's definitely not revealed in Chapter 1, but I feel like I remember what Pennywise is and why, like, not necessarily why he's in Derry, but like I said, what he is. And I don't know how that correlates. Maybe it's just like this just happened to be the place that you ended up. We'll leave it at that. But maybe that's all there is to it. It's just a draw luck of the draw. Unlucky luck of the draw where it just happened to be this particular town, or maybe there's something else to it that drew Pennywise here. Maybe there's just like maybe like a bloody, disgusting history of like evil that permeates this place. Oh yeah, because when they're like, because yeah, Ben told that story of like those 92 people or whatever that disappeared, but it was like, no, it wasn't indigenous people that killed them. People thought it was a plague or something because the people just disappeared, but we see in the pictures it shows that Pennywise was there. So once again, indicating like he's been around in this particular area for a very, 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 very long time. I think it is so interesting, the nightmare fuel element that is Pennywise and how it proceeds to go about you. Once again, using your own fears against you, because obviously for Bill, it's like, oh, let me use Georgie against you. Your guilt and your pain over that, especially because like the complicated relationship it's led to you having with your parents, because you probably feel a little bit of their guilt about on their part, but maybe also you feel like they blame you to some extent because you are the big brother and you just let him go even if you were sick, so that gets used against him. Beverly, there's the hair and the blood, which like obviously there's a lot to symbolize there. Like, well, she cut her hair because like her dad found that attractive. Like, we don't know the extent to what her dad ever did to her. But like he was very overly touchy and he wanted Beverly to stay his. He didn't want her to grow up too fast. So maybe that's also what the blood was about, where it was a situation of that blood was just like her fear of getting older, or maybe it's like, oh, I want to get older so my father isn't as attracted to me anymore, which is an effed up thing to say and an effed up situation to be in that regard. But it's just like the aspect of growing up and probably getting away, but maybe a fear of, or maybe she's afraid that getting older will just make her father more willing to do stuff to her, sadly. Richie has just straight up fear of clowns, but Richie is who Richie is, and he's very loudmouth. He's got the filthiest mouth, constantly talking about Eddie's mom and her vagina. But out of anyone, like, he's the one that overcompensates, for his fears and whatever. He puts up, like, he jokes and says like this like crazy shit just because he's scared, and it's his way of kind of compensating. I wonder, is there anything deeper to his clown fear? It's just like, clowns are unnerving, which is, I guess, maybe there's also supposed to be an irony there because he is a little bit of a clown himself, yet he is afraid of clowns. So maybe there's something you can read subtextually there. Mike, obviously, his fear is like the day like his parents died trying to get to him, but the room or the door was too hot, so they couldn't, and they burned alive. Stanley, there was just like this one creepy picture in his dad's like office, and that's what scared him. I don't know if that had any correlation to do with like I said, maybe there's something deeper with his like religion that might tie into. It seems like it's just like, hey, there's this one thing as a kid, like there's a creepy picture that your dad has that has always creeped you out, and that kind of gets used against you. As for Ben, it was like a headless body or whatever. Like, so I guess it's just like anything scary, because I don't know if there was any deep correlation to like what Ben was afraid of. Eddie, on the other hand, made sense. It's like this oozing like infected thing because Eddie's a hypochondriac because of his mom. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing too, really quickly, on like Eddie's mom seeming like, I don't know if it's necessarily a Munchausen by proxy situation, but like her kind of making like her own maybe hypochondriac elements she tried to instill on her son. Because it's, I even, what was he like the girl at the pharmacy taught him the word placebo, but I forgot what he says later on. He didn't say placebo. He said something similar, but like, was it placebo or something like that? Like, he says the word wrong because he doesn't know the word, but he also says like, sorry mom, I gotta go with my friend. So it's like he still loves his mom, but it's like, it's complicated when it's like, yeah, like you realize your mom kind of like over coddled you, and you've kind of like walked through life kind of always being afraid of everything, but especially the worst time for that, considering you're going up against a killer clown that uses your fear against you. So I wonder, does the book explore that friendship more? Like, are they around each other? Because obviously, once again, you kind of have to move pretty quickly through like, hey, like for the most part, most of this crew are friends. Obviously, the new additions are Ben, because he's a new kid in town. Mike, they probably never really interacted with. And then, like, Beverly as well. Because obviously, Bill and Beverly have history from back when they were kids. So, but I guess they never, like, she's always just been kind of like the girl that sadly rumors have been, like, spread around town, like, besmirching her and stuff like that. Because kids are kids, and they're cruel and can be very mean and evil sometimes, so. Because for the most part, the story takes place over the course of, like, from the beginning to, like, Well, because like the beginning of the movie is like 88, and then we go into 89. Because I think it's like fall of 88, and now it's like the summer of 89. And then like even the summer stuff, it's like from like, what was it, June-ish to like the end of the movie is in September. So all that happens over the course of months, and maybe in the books, like it is that same time frame, but we get to spend more, got to learn more about everybody and stuff like that. Or I wonder in the books, is it pretty quickly too still that the group just kind of like gets together, meshes together? I mean, trauma, bonding is a thing. So the terror and trauma that they're all going through would be enough to bring them all together. You also have to give it up for it being one of the perfect examples of the 80s bully, the classic psychopathic, psychopathy riddled bully, in this case being Henry. Man, oh man, is that kid a psychopath. But like any bully situation, it stems from something. But still, like the chase people down, like the alleyway situation where they almost ran over Mike and he's like, get out of our town, So there's some racism associated with that, because it's like, well, to be fair, he's trying to run a lot of people out of town, but specifically regarding Mike, probably don't get an opportunity to go into it. But it's the 80s. I'm sure there's still like racist elements to it. I'm sure there are racist history and elements in Derry as well, like any other place. That's the type. Racist evil probably enough to keep Pennywise tantalized and stuff like that. Tantalized is the word I'm trying to say. Sorry. But also what he did to Henry, like literally about to carve, not Henry, sorry, what he was going to do to Ben, literally carving his name into his stomach. Even one of the other bullies is like, almost like, hey, yo, like, are you serious? Like, at least one of them seemed to have at least some form of conscience. Granted, he still kicked it with Henry, but like the other three were just kind of like down for it. Of like, no, it was the other two were down for it, There's the one that went missing in the sewers. It's interesting because like he's all about fire, yet like I think the people that were coming after him were people that were burnt. So you're kind of like, oh, I wonder what does that deeper fear stem from? And it's like maybe that's your association with fire, because you're just like, oh, like you use it because it's an overcompensation of you have such a fear of it hurting you and burning you. So maybe that's why like the people initially chasing after him in the sewers like manifested that way. But circling back to Henry, his dad being who he was. I mean, it makes sense. Like, your dad, like, belittled you and made you feel small. Like, we saw the psychological abuse. Granted, I mean, he also shot at your feet to humiliate you. It's like, oh, look at him, guys. He wants to act so tough. So there was probably most likely physical abuse as well. But that's why he was such a terror to other people. Because it's like classic, like, transference of, I'm going through this, I gotta replicate it and do it to other people to make myself feel better, to make myself feel stronger and not as weak. And that he doesn't want to feel like a victim, so he wants to victimize other people just to make himself feel better. I guess the argument could be like, that kid was always going to, like, something bad was always going to happen. So if it wasn't Pennywise whispering to the darkness in his heart, which is so interesting because, like, it's the first, and I wonder, is it because Pennywise was in a weakened state at that point in the story that he was able to, like, why he even bother using Henry as kind of a avatar in a sense, I guess is the word I'm saying. But he was kind of your puppet because you knew you could use him, you could feed off his fear and his anger, but you never really yeah, you drove others with fear, but you never used them in the same way you did Henry, because I guess the others were like, yes, there's fear, but there's innocence to them. And maybe the reason why you never just took Henry is because there is no innocence in him. He is so dark and twisted by what has happened to him. Whereas it's at least the others, because I think that is part of the story. It's about, like I said, innocence being kept. Obviously, how they get rid of their innocence in the book is not covered in the movie, thank God. If you're curious, look it up, but it's a very infamous thing. I didn't find out until years and years later, where I'm like, oh, that's what happens in the book. It's like, yeah, it's the thing they refuse to adapt for like any adaptation because it's not necessary, because Stephen King was doing his thing and just might have been out of his mind when he wrote that part of the story. But like I said, I think that kind of plays into like Henry, where it's like his innocence is so like he's so dark and twisted that even though yes he has something to fear, he's not innocent. There's no light in him to snuff out because the light has already been snuffed out, and so you're more useful to me as a pawn because I can't eat you. That's like any other adult like running around the place because they've become jaded and contorted and twisted that I can't get anything from him. I need to gobble up the innocence of youth. Which that's also, like I said, I think that's in itself like stems from like why adults can't see anything. I mean, that scene in itself of like Beverly in the bathroom riddled with blood, and she's like, "Wait, you can't see," and her dad's like, "What are you talking about?" And why like, and you could probably read deeper metaphors into it of like like adults that are so like focused on their lives that they're not willing to look after. Yeah, it's kind of everyone's out for themselves. So like that couple that drove by that saw what was happening to Henry and not God, sorry, to happening to Ben and calling out for help, but no one would. But you see the red balloon in the back seat, and I think it's meant to be the thing of Pennywise keeps the general populace ignorant because it's easy for them in general because they want to be ignorant. They want to focus on them and they want to worry about them. They don't want to get caught up on other people's stuff, but that's also what Pennywise does. He puts up this almost glamour to keep you looking away because he needs you ignorant. But it's almost like I said, there is this glamour, like kids had the wherewithal and sight to be able to see things for what they are because they're still young and they haven't been, I guess, corrupted by the world and, like I said, lost that spark, whereas adults tend to have lost it in some shape or form. And I think they kind of do a really good job kind of playing into that, where it's like there are very few adults intrinsically tied to the story. Like, there's a few adults here and there. Like, even Billy's, like, you see Billy's mom only in the first scene when Georgie goes outside. No, I think it was him going to the cellar at first. Like, that's the only time you see the mom. You see the dad once when Billy's, like, trying to, like, hook up all the things, being like, this is where Georgie might have ended up. And, it's just adults kind of ignoring their children, and understandably, like, Billy and Georgie's parents were like going through their own thing. He was like, do not let your mom see this because she's barely been able to hold it together. And obviously she was going through a lot at the time, but still. The grief and pain that she and all of them were going through, like, Bill is the one that just kept being like, no, like, Georgie has to be alive because he needed Georgie to be alive because it's like he even says later on, going in that house, like going like almost halfway wanting to see his brother, expecting to see his brother and knowing he's not there, like that's eating him alive. It always is, and he tries to push it out of his mind, but it's like every time he comes home, it's just a constant reminder of it. I'm sure, I mean, we even see at one point in time he's at the dinner table and neither one of his parents is there. Like everyone's off in their own corners dealing with this rather than being a united family. And that's the perfect time for Pennywise to come and strike when you are so vulnerable and so alone. Their sorrow and pain is keeping them from seeing like, oh, maybe you're going through something too, because they haven't processed and dealt with their own pain and hurt, and that left Bill vulnerable to Pennywise coming after him and others. Because, like, obviously the only parents we get is, like I said, a little bit with Bill's. Same thing with Beverly's dad. Mike's parents are dead. Ben, we never meet his parents. Richie, we never meet his parents. Eddie, we meet his mom. Stanley, we see his dad. Which isn't to say there aren't any parents that don't care. Like I said, just some of them are, like Bill and Georgie's parents who were drowning in their sorrows, and the same thing for like Betty's mom, who was still showing up at school halfway expecting to see her, even though Betty had long since been gone. I mean, you could almost tie that into also like that aspect where they're like, right, children kind of get forgotten because the moment another one goes missing, the previous one kind of gets buried underneath. And we saw that with the representation of like, oh, this poster, this missing child was covered by the poster of the most recent missing child. And that's the point, once again, to keep everyone in town ignorant to what's going on so that no one really bothers knowing or noticing the pattern except for the kids, because they're the only ones who can kind of see through the veil of what Pennywise does and kind of the haze he has the town under about with like the deaths and stuff like that, because everyone just looks at it, it's like, oh, bad shit happens, it is what it is, not realizing there's something even more sinister and evil at play in this town, at the heart of this town. Probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because I just think it's so like well done and just so creepy and unnerving, is the scene with the projector. Because I remember that scene from the trailer and I was like, oh, that's such a good scene, especially when it like flips through all that Bill's family stuff and it gets to his mom, and his mom's hair is covering her face, and then it's just like slowly moving and moving and moving, and then she turns into Pennywise, and then him like turning out that, like, once they knock the projector over, in like that blurry version of him on the projector disappears, and then the giant version of him is in the room. Stuff like that is so creepy and so good. I mean, just also the quick transitions from between like the creepy thing he's like disguising himself as, and then like turning back into himself. It's like, oh, he'll chase, like for example, when Eddie got chased by like that infected thing, and then he turned around and there's Pennywise with all the balloons, and it's just like once again, Bill's voice for it, and just that devilish smile, and just the creepiness. It's just like everything. Another one that was also, I remember from the trailers and previews, was like the one with like Georgie in the basement going after Bill, just being like, "You'll float too, you float too, you'll float too," and then him just like jittering and making his way toward, and just like that, just like him like on the stairs when Bill closed the door and his eyes rolling back and him dragging his face as like going back into order, just like just the imagery and just the performance and just the creepiness of it all. Um, Then you have Eddie with that situation where like he got cornered by Pennywise and like fell down the hole, landed on the table, broke his arm, and then Pennywise is grabbing on him, scaring the ever living crap out of him. He trying to do what he's doing, but then like everyone kind of came together and attacked. Well, I forgot who initially. I think it's, wasn't it Beverly who initially like stabbed him with the poker and stuff like that, and just the creepiness of it like being partway through his head. Hell, poor Ben got like clawed in his stomach, and Bill's the one that followed him down to see him crawling back down the well, and Bill being like, yo, we need to go after that thing, we need to kill it, but it's like it's weakened now. But everyone's like, nah, fuck that, we're gonna end up dead. Richie, once again, is all the bravado, all the talk, but like talk is cheap when shit gets scary. I mean, he was freaked out the most because those fake posters of him going missing, and a fear like, oh my god, is it targeting me next? And the moment he gets a chance, he goes after you alone. The room full of clown dolls and stuff, and them turning their heads towards you. You open the casket, there's a doll version of you. Then he jumps out, like that whole sequence in itself. I mean, some time passed after that too, because everyone tried to go back to normal lives. But it's like, how do you do that? Like when that's rummaging through the back of your mind the entire time, knowing like that thing's out there. It's like, how long can you pretend, live life? But you're like, as long as we're not interacting with it. But I think you could probably make the argument like Pennywise had to recover. Like after that, like it was like, it seemed like, this thing isn't like fully invincible. Like if you get enough courage and like do some work, it can be hurt. So it had to crawl back. I think that's also once again why it had to use Henry, because it still needed more time to heal, because it's probably in a situation where it needs to get something from the kids to heal itself, to keep it going, its longevity and everything. It's like, other than without them, it would probably wither and die. As Bill kind of says near the end of the movie, it's like, oh, you're going to starve. It's like, but that probably also helps with like any regenerative stuff. Like either it takes longer if it doesn't eat any kids, or because I think probably going into the final battle, Pennywise was still in a weakened state because it hadn't eaten any kids since then. Because yeah, it took Beverly, but it didn't like eat her because she wasn't afraid and it couldn't. Because also at that time, she had faced her biggest fear, and that was her dad. She stood up to him and fought back against him. So Pennywise kind of picked the worst time to strike. That's why he used her purely as bait, because he couldn't use her in any other manner. Something I'm curious about, like, I don't think it ever gets explained in the movie why Ben was so interested into diving into. I guess maybe he's just, I've always been interested in history. Maybe that's a part of his character that's like alluded to in a story but never really dived into. Because I'm like, why would you bother? Like, because even before stuff really popped off, but I guess maybe like by that point there were already all those missing kids, so maybe he was just curious about the town in general. Because I think probably when he first moved here, he probably heard, because I think he said like one of his parents talked about this town being evil, so I guess out of curiosity he had already started researching it. Probably like the missing kids probably already drew his attention, but then like all the death that like was riddled throughout the town's history probably like made him decide to dive even deeper into all of it. At the end of the day, you do kind of feel bad for Henry, despite him being a massive piece of shit. You can't help but feel bad for him because it's that nurture versus nature conversation. It's like he became the way he did because of his dad. Doesn't make it right, but you do feel. I mean, like I said, if it wasn't this way, his story probably would have ended up effed up in some other fashion. He probably would have done some other horrendous stuff, even though he was already doing horrendous stuff. But it probably would have gotten so much worse, him being older. But also, like, I mean, I didn't talk about it earlier, but yeah, his dad is also a cop too. So like who do you turn to in that situation? It's like, who's to say in the past he's never made stuff go away? Like, kind of ignore my kid. It's like he's like, I don't know if he was like the head like sheriff or anything like that in town, but it's like he's a cop, and so like, who can you turn to in like an abuse type of situation like that? He could probably make a lot of stuff go away. I think that's also like, I mean, if you put it together too, like the scene where Henry's like hanging out with his friends, firing off his dad's gun, is immediately after him and his friends got humiliated by the Losers Club when they were throwing rocks at him to protect Mike. His pride was hurt because like the others ran away and there he is like laying. And I think Richie even says some line about like, yo, blow your dad with like your mullet motherfucker or something like that, which like obviously his dad's a sore spot, but it's like he always felt superior to them, and for them to stand up to him, I'm sure like there's a deep psychological level of just kind of like it turned him back into the boy that he is in front of his father, until Pennywise pushed him to kill his dad. And once again, even without Pennywise, might have kind of gone down that path regardless. Like there was only so much, like I said, that's what made Henry the perfect like little puppet for Pennywise. He was a ticking time bomb, sadly. But so, like I said, you kind of feel bad for him. But then also, like I said, he's the stereotypical cliche piece of shit bully that you're like, you got what you deserve. Like, I mean, he was seconds away from putting a bolt gun bullet inside of Mike's head, and then Mike charged and knocked him down the well. And you're like, yeah. I mean, you were going to go to jail. You legitimately murdered your dad. Like, there was no, like, getting around this. So I also feel bad for poor Stanley. Like, literally, like, had Pennywise's mouth around his face. It's like, gee. He was the one that's probably, like, the most afraid. And obviously, knowing what the second part of the story is, that reigns even more so true, knowing like out of any of them he was the one that was like the most afraid out of any of them. But like, yeah, like, uh, more likely to conquer your fear as a kid than as an adult. I think it's probably a deeper commentary too, maybe, or just you could maybe extrapolate from the story in that regard. But especially because they had made that whole thing of like, right, as long as we're together, we're fine. And then he got separated. It's like they didn't leave him alone. It's like Pennywise specifically sectioned you off because you were the most reluctant to go in, even with the others being there. At least they were a unit, so that's why Pennywise made sure to section them off, like to go after Stanley first because he saw you were the weakest link. So then there's the situation with Beverly, being forced to levitate along with all the other kids, and that's where all the floating comes from. But like, what that really is all about, why keep the bodies like that? Like, what's the ritualism there? What is the purpose of that? Because because I doubt every kid was there. Like, I guess, like, once he's taken what he needs from the kids, like, because I doubt every kid's body was there, because I doubt Georgie's body was there, because I'm sure, like, he gobbled everything up, or maybe there's pieces to bodies that were there, but you'll probably not really be able to tell what belongs to who, because there's just so many kids and probably so many pieces scattered all throughout those sewers and stuff. You have Ben kind of doing a little bit of a Prince Charming situation, kissing Beverly, and everyone's like, "Oh, whoa!" And it ultimately ended up working. That's where I'm like, I don't know if that scene in particular right there is the thing where I don't, like I say, I don't even want to say it, because in the context of them being kids, I don't even want to utter the words, but like that, the thing that happens in the book, that the book is like, it's a notorious bit in the book. I wonder if that sequence in particular is when that happens. It's like when Beverly's in that like in between state. Is that how they snap her out of it? Because I thought it was like used to beat Pennywise, and I don't, like I said, I don't know the full context of it. I've heard people talk about it. All the while, Bill has his confrontation with Georgie, and Georgie's like, "Yeah, you were supposed to find me." He's like, "I looked everywhere for you." And he's like, "Oh, are you mad about me?" He's like, "Oh," and bringing back the whole full circle thing of like, "Oh, boats, they're called she's." Like, most boats end up being called she's. And it's like, the fact is he didn't know that kind of proves, like, right, that's not really Georgie. That's this thing pretending to be Georgie. And he's just like, "Yeah, I want to go home to mom and dad." He's like, "I wish more than anything you could be back with me, mom and dad, but you're not Georgie," and puts a bolt gun in his head. Problem is, sadly, Mike, when he was reloading it, dropped all of them, because in cliche fashion, it's like, of course you got to go into the final battle of like not armed to the gills, and then kind of that dilemma of like, oh, it's like, I've got Bill now, so you leave him with me, and the fact is you can go live your lives until you grow old and return to the weeds, and I'll go and rest after I snack on good old Bill here, but you get to leave, right? So that's a good deal. And then Richie just being like, "See, I told you it was your fault, Bill. Because of this, you punched me, this and that. Now I'm gonna have to fucking kill this clown." I'm like, "Fuck yeah, Richie." And I love, you're like, "Fuck yes," like when everyone stomps him in, and just like everyone's ganging up on him, choking him out. Bill's like hitting him with the chain. There's bats. There's like metal rods stabbing him and stuff like that. It's just like everyone's getting in. I was like, yes, big time beat down. And it's just, you're just like feeling so good. It's like, you always enjoy moments like that when everyone rises together, comes together as a team, and beats down the monster and beat him into a corner. Because I think it was especially because he tried to manifest himself as like different fears, like, oh, the thing that Stanley's afraid of, but it's like, nope, whack, this and that, throws up on Eddie, and Eddie's just like, "You make me," and like kicks him. And then the final one, it took on the form of Beverly's dad, and Beverly like shoved a pipe down its throat, but then it starts like almost drowning in its own like fluids, and it backs up to the well, and he's like, "Yo, we're not afraid of you." He's like, for the first time, you're afraid, because I guess in all the years no one has fought back, which makes that, knowing the prequel, you're like, oh, that makes it even sadder, because like none of those kids can make it, right? Like, considering like, I mean, it almost implies like the loser club are the first ones who ever properly fought back, whereas the others are just kind of like probably more victims, like, because like I said, the prequel's got to be in like 62, because that's the last set of incidents before the events of this part of the story. So, but once again, that's something, the prequel is the prequel, so we'll have those conversations probably maybe more in chapter 2, and just about what the future, or rather the past, looks like in that regard. But either way, but with Pennywise, quote unquote, dead, but in a very severely weakened state, kind of just coming, eventually potentially healing itself in the process, the bodies start floating down. So I'm assuming the kids just let everyone, like, once again, I don't know if details like this are covered in the book, but the movie kind of skirts over, because it went from like August to September. But like all those bodies there, they most likely led everyone to the bodies, I'm assuming, so that there could be closure for those who've lost important people. But it's like, what did the kids say? Like, it's like if they tell them about the clowns, well, no one's going to believe them about Pennywise. So what do you just say? Like, we stumbled across the bodies. Like, well, what happened to Stanley's face? He fell, like something grabbed him. We don't know. Maybe they did say it, but no one believed them. Maybe they thought like, oh, this is trauma induced by everything that they saw. They came across these bodies. It was something horrendous. Yada yada yada, so on and so forth. Maybe that's all there is to it. I'm like that in between right there is something I'm so curious about. Like I said, probably to get some of those answers, I could probably find answers to that easily online, but probably those details exist somewhere in the book, maybe. Obviously, it's so sad to be brought together by something so traumatic, but then something beautiful did come out of all of that. They have each other. They built a real strong bond, but sadly, as the story goes the way it goes, but there's still importance. There's still importance there, and there's still necessity there for the story to go forward on like where those bonds take them and how that like gets handled. But still, like it wasn't like it was all for nothing. It was all for naught. Like it gave them the courage to stand up in this moment, and obviously they made their pledge. Like, yeah, if this thing ever comes back, we will come back as well. Making that promise. Once again, extra sad knowing what the future holds. Like that's also like the hard thing to ever separate, because I keep reiterating that, but it's like, because I know what the future holds, it makes certain things here where you're just like, oh, that's sad. Everyone's pretty much going their separate ways. To what extent we don't, like, obviously we know Beverly's leaving town because like I'm assuming her dad's not dead and he's just maybe arrested, or definitely he lost all rights to her because she's living with her aunt. I'd assume it's like going to be like her mom's sister and not her dad's sister. Not like it would matter, but I think you'd probably feel more comfortable with like someone from your mom's side of the family. I think you just be able to kind of at least have some like dissonance and like able to create some kind of form of distance in your head with that. So, but the others seem to kind of go. But the Losers Club is kind of breaking up. But like a lot of them are going to stay in town. I think I don't know how many of them act. We know eventually they do move and leave. At least I think. I don't remember where everyone ends up, but I think most of them, if not all of them, for the most part, did leave and never came back. For the most part. So I'm like, I don't know when. Is it like relatively soon after all of this? Did all of them stay in town for a while and just kind of try to live a normal life, knowing what they've been through, knowing what they experienced? I mean, it's once again, it's a bond where it's just like you shared something, an experience no one else will ever understand. That's why, any future fight is so important to you, because you started this fight, you didn't finish it, so it was time to finish it later on. But despite them going their separate ways, I do love, like I said, there is an uplifting hopefulness to it all. And it ended all in that way. I think it's kind of beautiful. But what's the last thing as you reach the end of the credits when it says "it one last time"? You hear that good old Pennywise laugh, and now obviously also at the end showing you like, oh, it chapter 1, so. Like I said, I do know the story to some small degree. Like I said, it's been forever since I've seen the 90s adaptation of it. And like I said, I've never seen chapter 2 at all. So when I do watch it, it will be the first time. But I remember, like I said, certain small story bits, but overall, like, I don't know what to fully expect. And like I said, I don't remember enough of the original to make a comparing and contrast. And like I said, I'll talk about things that I remember, like I said, about what Pennywise actually is. I don't know if they ever explore it. I don't know if I only know that because people have talked about it. I don't know if they ever expressly, even in the 90s adaptation, ever expressly was like, oh, this is what Pennywise is. I have an idea, but I don't know if that's just like something that is from the books that people have talked about, or whether like people just surmise that Pennywise is this thing or whatever. But how the story concludes with part 2, like the reunion, the lead up to the proper like conclusion to all of this, is going to be interesting to watch that, like I said, for the first time and see. I wonder, will like a lot of the jump scares get me, because because jump scares can get me. It's not like I'm immune to them. So I'm just curious to see like how scary the second one is, and especially in comparison. And it's like, did I not feel I felt like I said uneasy and nervous and kind of like ugh. But like I don't know if I was like scared, but like I said, I've seen this once already. So having never seen chapter 2, I'm curious like how my reaction to that will be. Excited to continue the story and see how it all plays out. Like I said, how it reaches its conclusion, as well as what other lore might be kind of expanded upon in the second movie as well. I remember some of the cast as the adults, but I don't remember everyone. So it's going to be interesting. Cause I'm trying to remember cause I was trying to remember the entire time. I was like, who plays older Beverly? I was like, was it Jessica Chastain? Because I know James McAvoy and Bill Hader were two I could remember. I don't. Isn't the actor named Jay Ryan? I think he plays the older version of Ben, if I remember correctly. It's been so long since I remember seeing the cast, but either way, I'm excited to jump into part 2 and see how this all plays out. I know part 2 is not like everyone's favorite. People like chapter 1 a lot more, but I think the general consensus is always, well, that's just because even in the book, chapter 1, like the first part of the story, them as kids, it's always the more interesting story. Even in the book, them being adults is kind of like the least interesting stuff. So like first half of the story is always the better half for most people, but I'm still excited to check out the second chapter and see for myself my thoughts. I might feel the same way, but I'm most likely still going to enjoy the second part regardless. But yeah, I've kind of was a little all over the place. I do apologize. Like I said, I'll try to time code things and kind of like give you a rough idea of stuff you can kind of jump around to. It's kind of a moot point to kind of say all that now, considering this is the end of the recording, but still. I hope you enjoyed this kind of like re-watch, review, re-review, re-watch / re-discussion, I guess, even though I've never like properly discussed it on this channel. Even when I watched it, I wasn't really doing movie discussions like outside of like superhero stuff at the time. So yeah, I've run my mouth off long enough. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.